So Miami Tech, we've been here for about 2 years now. Um, and our recent venture, which I'll talk about, Go Sprout, is kind of under the umbrella. And so when we think about an apprenticeship program, we know that it really starts with an employer who believes in investing in people. In the UK and Europe, in many countries in Europe, for example, apprenticeship is like 50% of what people do. In the US, I think we only have like 700,000 apprentices in the country right now, because of for many reasons. But I think it goes back to that impatience, the idea, just like what the guy told me. I want to hire the top talent from the top school. I got all this money, and so that creates a vacuum, right? Where what if you start to lose money? You can't afford to hire top talent. How do you create talent and create talent pipeline? So that's what a registered apprenticeship program is. We'll go through each of these. And we'll pause on this screen because we're going to actually talk through this with Dantrail. So here we are, the key players in an apprenticeship program: a sponsor. That could be an employer or it can be a college. Both benefit from being one. So you can be Google, you can be, Johnny's electrical shop, you can be Amazon, you can be a company who says we want to create a program, or you can be a college like Miami-Dade College, for example, who has one of the leading apprenticeship representatives in all the country, Dr. Alexia Roll, who runs the program there. And the college basically, maybe some employer reached out to them. We need talent. Help us find people. Okay, cool. Let's create a registered apprenticeship program. So now the college, especially if it's public, gets tuition paid for. So the students don't pay out of pocket. They get a job and they earn college credits. That's like the trifecta of workforce: job, no debt, credential. And so we're going to start at this bottom. Well, I gave over the overview of the sponsor. I wanted to turn it over to Dantrail because you were an apprentice.
Yeah.
And can you talk to us about that journey, how you found out about it? Mm-hmm. What did you think you were signing up for? How did it go? And, some general thoughts on that world.
Yeah. So I was introduced to the concepts of apprenticeships. This was about 2005. I was in high school. There was an announcement over the PA system, and I was actually asleep. I was sleeping. It was that time in the morning.
Ability to.
Yeah. I'm like, I don't have any work to do right now. And I just heard some mumbling about FPL over the PA system. And I heard $27 an hour. Now, we live in South Florida. $27 an hour is like, okay, but this is 2005. So just to put it in perspective, that same role is probably closer to $50 an hour. So this is what that was at that time for me. And that's all I heard. And I just jumped up. I'm like, yo, what's, I know how much my mom makes, and this is more than that, and I can start this now. So I got up, ran down the hall, ran to the guidance counselor, and I'm like, yo, what was that? I want to do whatever that was. And she said, well, give it a second. They'll be out to the school and they'll talk to everybody about it. So it was about 400 students in my class getting this presentation about FPL, and they were talking about all the things you needed to do. But at the end, maybe 10 people showed up. And I was excited. I was playing football at the time as well. And again, being from South Florida, we all have promising futures from the start with football. We're all fast. We love the game. But I saw that as an opportunity that would give me something that's a little bit more guaranteed. So I took the initial training, learned how to climb poles, learn how to work with some tools, and you finish that, you pass like what's called a TABE test, and then you get accepted into the program. So in my 11th grade year, I started the apprenticeship program for FPL, for line work.
Was it considered a pre-apprenticeship at the time, or you were directly?
Yeah, so it was a pre-apprenticeship because you had to be 16.
Okay.
So what they would do is kind of teach us the basics. So when we graduated, you would be able to skip past the helper roles and the groundman roles and go straight into your apprenticeship, cutting about 2 years off of the time it took to be an apprenticeship.
Was that a 5-year program? Do you remember?
So generally, lineman programs are 4-year programs. I mean, 4-year programs.
Yeah.
So this allowed me to work in high school, learn for 2 years.
Were you getting paid at that point?
We were getting paid off of school. So every summer we would do something to where we're getting more hands-on experience. So my 11th grade, at the end of my 11th grade year, going to 12th grade, we worked the whole summer
Wow.
with crews, and real life situations. And then you go back, and then that year they make the work a little bit more intensive to prepare you to actually be prepared to work.
So I'm gonna try to recap and bring it back because this is a model that right now is such a emphasis of the Department of Labor.
Mm-hmm.
You're doing this 2005.
Right.
The original apprenticeship programs were tied to occupations like linemen, HVAC, construction, because those roles typically require a lot of like presence, a lot of time before you start to climb a pole, cut some wires.
Yeah.
You want to get a lot of hours in your belt, right, before you start doing that. So the lineman, can you share a little bit about the role of a lineman and what you learned? Yeah.
So I didn't know what a lineman is. Was,
With
that's
football. You on a football
exactly.
team. So, yeah.
That's what I'm thinking, but I was just at that point in my life, and I'm like, yo, this will help my family. I'll figure it out what it is when I get there. But alignment essentially is we work on the grid. We work on what we did specifically are from substations. So, in the neighborhood, you see these big industrial looking things, they're a power plant. That is where power is distributed from that point to hospitals, schools, all of the lines you see, the normal size lines you see riding around. We work on that. We do maintenance, we do construction, brand new construction. Of course, we restore outages. So this was the career. And then there's also an underground version called a splicer. So that's where I ended my journey, becoming a splicer, working downtown. Downtown, you don't see any lines. So there's two programs attached to being a lineman or a part of line work.
Wow. That little crash course right there.
Yeah,
Thank you. Appreciate that. So, and these are careers, you're talking about career in FPL, you're talking about well-paid roles, career trajectory. So that's one thing I want to highlight is that an apprenticeship is actually like a career pathway. It's not like a gig. It's not an internship. It's not a short job. You're basically starting somewhere, and each time you make a leap in terms of your learning, it gets matched with an increase in pay.
Yeah.
So from 27 or even 50 now, maybe the starting, the ending could be, sometimes 200% more than that or something like that, right? And so all right, so let's go back in time again. So you hear the opportunity, you hear the pay, you hear the benefits, you enroll. Take us through the journey. Oh, I think a key thing you said too is that by you doing it in high school, which by the way was meeting your high school requirements, right? You were also meeting the requirement of the occupation program, of the registered apprenticeship program. Talk a little bit about that dynamic. How was that?
That was also great because at that time I was like a 2.0, closer to 1.9 student. I'm
round up. It's safe space.
Yeah, and I'm in gifted. So I love education, I love learning, but it's just, the school system without a purpose isn't something that gets everybody's attention. So joining this program allowed me to have something to be excited about. And by the time I graduated, I was getting, majority A's. Like my mom cried. She saw one of my report cards. They were like all A's.
Wow.
But it was just the interest because you're getting hands-on learning. You actually learn it. It's not just turning a wrench and then you get an A. You have to study. You have to do homework. And then you're going back and finishing the rest of your courses that you have to take, your English, your math, things of that nature. So that was that. So that transformed me as a student.
So just to be clear, you feel that the fact that in school you had this newfound passion, awareness, knew about what was coming at the end of the road, actually made you get better academically?
Yeah. And, with my test scores and being in gifted, I should have been pushed to be in college. So that speaks to, going to some of these inner city schools and who's focused on, looking at the talent and guiding them. There's no way I should have made it that far without somebody saying, hey, what are your interests are? You're testing. There is times where I'm testing at the top 5%, 2% in the nation and not doing my homework, not focused on anything, just coming in, destroying a test, knocking it out of the park. This was back when we had the
all of the
and stay nines and all these different things, and then just going back to like kind of passing, So to me, that's just it's a massive waste of talent. Like, Dr. Marcus Bright, we go talk to students all the time. They already know about trading, investing, and all these different things, but there's no extra element to guide them and extract that talent and start them on the right path.
Yeah, I mean, you're hitting on some pillars that right now this administration is really trying to pull out, especially for career and technical education.
Right.
CTE as a department, which historically focused on electrical, right, HVAC. Then you throw in some IT roles, help desk technician. These occupations that pay great wages, have great benefits, have in terms of insurance and upward mobility and all these things, but we're seeing less and less of students signing up to be in those occupations. So the crisis we have is that people are retiring and taking that knowledge with them.
Yep.
And then you have these vacancies and employers aren't able to fill them, and then they're struggling, and it creates this whole situation. If you looking back now, as you can look back now, what were some of the ways that you feel could be replicated and how it gets marketed today to this youth,
right,
to those kids like you sitting at that class in their desk? Like, what do they want to hear? You feel?
So I think it starts with having somebody knowledgeable that the students would trust, for one. Like, you have to see somebody, like, I'm doing engineering now. I never met an engineer as a kid. I have a joke to where I say I've never even met a black dentist growing up. So how can you aspire to be something that you've never seen? And I know we say that all the time, but literally, like, you don't know what this role is that you may have a promising future in. So, having somebody like myself go back to schools, talk to kids, attracting them with the flash of the money, but then also once you get their ear, talking about the promise of, my friends right now, they all have houses, they all have families, they can help their mothers, their fathers.
They're the ones who went through the program as well.
Yeah, they're still there, and some of them are making upwards of $250,000, no high school degree.
Wow.
And you don't hear these things about the electrical trades, plumbing trades, but this is how the world works. If all of the computers cut off right now, you'll still need these people just for our baseline needs. So, just explaining that.
Yeah.
And then explaining some of the stuff they want to hear, like, I've always been traveling.
Yeah.
I've always had fun. The shoes you like, if you're a sneakerhead, imagine,
yeah, you can,
making
that's not your whole check. Right.
On a check, and now a $200 pair of shoes, it's nothing to you.
Right.
Versus what some of the things you probably had to do to get those shoes in the past.
Yeah.
Or even saving up for them,
This model, I'm obsessed with it right now. I'm really pushing it. The Department of Labor is pushing it. The school district is pushing it, at least the Career and Technical Education Department we get to work with, because that pre-apprenticeship pathway that gets you some college credits, gets you time earned for the main program. So talk about when you transition out of high school, you stayed in the program. Can you share about how that worked out?
And it's funny because this is where my passion for apprenticeship comes, and it's kind of tying into what I said about the interest in the people who are guiding you. I failed my first apprenticeship. And again, it's a situation just like school. It wasn't that I didn't have the talent, but I didn't have the interest I think I needed from some of the people who were teaching to make sure that this person gets through. Like, if I had an apprentice right now, and it's somebody who you can say looks like you, but this somebody I resonate with. That can be anybody, somebody who I have some kind of compassion for. I'm going to give them the best opportunity because I know that this job can be transformative for them. And, that's not owed to anybody. That's kind of a thing that you want to have for somebody. But, we've all taken tests and failed. Like, the person administering the test, they don't have to care if you pass or fail or not.
Right.
So, but that was a blessing in disguise, because failing at that point, even though it was tough, it set me on a path to create more ambition about what I'm doing, because it was just that point of proving that I could do this. And I explored the whole company. So now I got a chance to do all of the jobs and work with everybody, work with the underground, the overhead, and customer service. And, even got to the point in the future where, like, once management did see, like, yo, it's something different about this guy. Now I'm working with management. I got picked up by the union and had a direct role working with the union. Now I'm learning the IBW. 359. That's my home. That's my family. But you know, I worked directly with the presidents in the union. I was the voting judge for a short time. So I'm riding from here to Lake Worth, and I'm learning all these things about the system. And it taught me more about the business outside of just doing the work. That if I passed my apprenticeship at that point, I would have just been happy with the $150,000, $200,000, taking my kids to Disney, and you know, whatever side investments, I'm sure I would be doing something.
Right.
But I wouldn't know the business like I know now. So hindsight, it's like a success story to have that early failure. And then I went into, you know, the splicing apprenticeship towards the end, and I was like super ready. You know, I had a different approach, and I also thought of the idea of saying, I can't wait to have apprentices one day so they don't have to go through this.
Wow.
You know, that created that story, which I've held on to today, and now is the perfect time to create something like that.
So we just dove into the apprentice story, right? Here in Dantrail and that, and then you can apply other occupations to that same framework, right? The RTI is the related training instruction. So you heard a little bit about the training he was getting in the school. Typically, the apprentice also goes to class at night, or does asynchronous work, however that might be. I'm super curious about your experience with journey workers, mentors. Mentors are supposed to be the ones right next to you, basically guiding you along the way. They're holding you accountable to make sure that you have earned the skills. And in an electrical environment, that's like a life or death issue, right? Can you talk a little bit about your experience with mentors throughout it?
So I would say first and foremost, FPL, and we see FPL as a local company, but it's one of the leading electrical companies on earth. So they have the money and the time to invest into a high level of training. So I'm setting you up for what I'm about to say. Even with that,
they got resources, basically.
Right. But the consistency in training, it's always there's a gap, because some guys are just walking and breathing the trade. You know, they're like the whisperers when you said this is the line whisperer. And then some people just show up to work, you know, and there's some inconsistencies there to where, like, if you're the apprentice that gets the greatest instructor or the greatest journeyman to work behind, you're getting a lot more than the person who's just getting a guy who's just showing up to work.
So it's almost like the school that has like the average teacher, the great teacher, and sometimes it's by luck how you get placed where you end up.
Now, what FPL and what I learned from the company is the systems kind of put a control gap to make sure that the students are learning the same quality all at once. So even if you get released to a C student journeyman, you and your class have learned all of the same language, and
they're more of like a little supplemental backbone versus like the driver of the experience.
Yeah, and you can keep yourself safe because you know the safety rules without somebody teaching you.
That's interesting.
Something that may not be on par with what's going on now. So that's one of the main things I got, and there were still things that I said, yeah, I can improve on.
Yeah.
When it's my turn, because I'm actually living in the moment. But I did see a lot of success from FPL's program eliminating injuries.
Yeah.
You know, when I first got in, there was an injury every month.
Wow.
My current yard, well, my former yard, Northeast Service Center, before I left, we had like 4 or 5 years injury free.
Wow.
Because it wasn't because, the technology got better and the communication got better, but you start to see the guys who learned from our that similar experience, we became foremen and journeymen, and it was like we were all speaking the same language.
Wow.
You know, instead of this older guy got trained in North Carolina and this guy got trained in Florida, and it's 2 different ways to do line work, and there's going to be a lot of potential for error in between those communication gaps. We're all speaking the same language. So I can go work with somebody from my time period as an apprentice and West Palm Beach right now, and we can just get rolled because there was a consistency. So that's the model that I took, and I said I'm going to build on that. And with that, I want to build something that's scalable to where you can scale that outside of a particular region or a particular company and apply it to where we can all work together. Because it's the same thing, you know. A Mac can talk to a Microsoft or a Linux computer because there's just some standards that are applied across the board. So I want to also help with standardizing our approach to apprenticeships. So you have less of a turnover rate. You know, you have less people falling out because they're just getting inconsistent learning. So that's what we're focused on.
Dropping gems over here, Dantra. I think a few things come to mind. I'm gonna zoom out real quick and go to the employer lens. So here's an employer hiring, creating this. In this case, is FPL. So to Dantra's point, in terms of like the resources, the capacity of what they have. But you know, the same thing with if you think about schools and schools budgets, and you would assume that they have things in place, but we all know sometimes they don't. Things fall through the cracks.
Right.
Now, an employer who creates an apprenticeship, they're also potentially getting some federal funding back. They're getting wage reimbursement. They're getting access to projects that the government says, if you have apprenticeship, we want you to build this school or this government building. So the employer, I just want to remind you all too, they have a benefit, but an ROI. But I think the key thing is the creation of this talent line. When you talk about improved safety, 4 to 5 years, right? When you talk about camaraderie, community, like those are some of the things that make an employer at the heart like thrive, right? Like, and that's going to impact the bottom line. Happy worker, more productive worker. So many parts associated with that. And I just wanted to zoom out for a second on the employer side. The journey worker who's with the employer, who's basically in charge of kind of like coordinating the training and making sure you're getting exposed to the right things. There's a big push on equity and the lens of like seeing, you know, Black, African-American, Hispanic, Latino presence, increased numbers in apprenticeship. And from the research we've done in terms of looking at some of the dynamics of journey worker in trade and the apprentices, did you encounter anything, or talk a little bit about through an equity lens what you experienced looking back?
So it's tough with line work